know lots of people in California who have talked to me, half joking or not, about how appealing this CalExit idea is since Donald Trump was elected president. But the leader of the organization that has spearheaded that movement, the leader of Yes California, he really does live in Russia. He lives in Siberia. Last September, the Yes California guy, who conveniently lives in Russia, the CalExit guy, and also some right-wing Texas separatists all got invited to Moscow, to the Ritz Hotel in central Moscow for a Kremlin-funded conference called the Anti-Globalization Movement of Russia. And I know it sounds nuts. Look it up on Snopes.com if you don't believe me. There you will find links to the Embassy of the Independent Republic of California, with the tweet announcing its founding, half in English, half in Cyrillic, and an explanation from the CalExit founder, who lives in Russia, that the separatist California Embassy office space is being loaned to him in Moscow free of charge. He says he doesn't actually know who owns the office space. Maybe it's privately owned, he doesn't know, maybe it's the Russian government, who can tell? But it's sure nice to have free office space for his California separatist movement that he's running from Russia. That's a ridiculous story, right? That is a ridiculous idea. It is cartoonish, but it's real. And imagine if your goal was to take the United States down a few pegs in the esteem of the world, in terms of global leadership, in terms of the way the rest of the world looked up to the United States for help or for advice, or, conceivably as an exemplar of democracy, certainly as a pinnacle economic power. Imagine how helpful it would be if your goal was to erode all that, to hurt all of that. Imagine how helpful it would be to that goal if you had a chance, even a slim chance, even a hilarious, cartoonish, tiny chance of splitting off from the United States one of its 50 states that on its own terms is the 6th largest economy in the world. You pry California off the United States, California literally has a bigger economy than France does. I mean, yeah, it would be nice to pry Germany out of the EU, pry France out of the EU. But you know what? The EU is splitting apart on its own. We'll do what we can to help, but let's think big. Theresa May is the British Prime Minister who will now be tasked with managing Britain pulling out of the European Union. She is not the politician who was credited with Britain's decision to leave the EU. That honor goes to Nigel Farage, who was the leader of the UK Independence Party, which spearheaded the Brexit campaign. Nigel Farage has become mildly famous in this country for his frequent appearances alongside Donald Trump and at Trump Tower and at the White House. Oddly, the day that WikiLeaks held its press conference to crow about the fact that they were releasing a devastating document dump that experts say essentially exposed the entire cyber arsenal of the CIA, on that same day, Nigel Farage was at the Embassy of Ecuador, where WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange lives, and from which he gave his press conference that day. A BuzzFeed News reporter saw Nigel Farage leaving the embassy that day, asked him what he was doing there. Nigel Farage responded by saying that he couldn't remember. He said he had no idea what he had just been doing inside that building. More recently, this past week, Nigel Farage has been in California, raising money among conservatives and Trump supporters in California to support California seceding from the United States, or at least splitting itself in two. Today, the Republican and Democratic senior members of that Senate Intelligence Committee, they announced that they've got 20 names on their list of people they want to talk to for their investigation into Trump and Russia. They hinted that former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and former Acting Attorney General Sally Yates are among those 20 people. They confirmed that the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will be one of the people who they speak to. On the House side, the House investigation may or may not be blowing up. We'll hear more about that tonight from Congressman Schiff. But that Senate investigation is going ahead. Their first public hearing will be tomorrow. It's not something you will want to miss if you're interested in this issue. But just one point about that. This last point I'm going to make. The Republican chairman of that committee, Richard Burr, confirmed today in no uncertain terms that there's one thing that committee will not be looking at. And that is the question of whether or not the Russian attack is over. Whether Russia is still doing their thing. Whether they are, in fact, basically collecting their payment from the Trump administration now in exchange for their part in throwing the election Trump's way. That the committee is not going to be looking at.
Ask, will you also be looking at the potential rewards Russia adopted, as well as questions of changes to the Republican Party platform and convention, or the way the president constantly refuses to criticize Vladimir Putin? Is that part of what you're looking at?
Well, that's not in the scope of the investigation. I'll leave that up to you guys to report. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Next question. Senate Intelligence Committee will not be looking at whether or not this Russian attack, this Russian campaign is over. In terms of what that committee is going to investigate, I think we all fully expect that they will look at what the Russian attack on our election was. I think our country doesn't necessarily expect, but at least hopes, that they will look at whether Russia had help in pulling off that attack on our election, whether the Trump campaign or any other American Confederates helped them in their attack. We hope that they will look at that too, and they say they will, but they made clear today, they made explicitly clear today that they will not look, they will not even consider questions about whether Russia's attack on the United States is still underway, or whether anybody who might have helped them in that attack last year
just
might still
happened?
be helping
Or are
them
you
today
exaggerating a little
to
bit?
get what they want. As Richard Burr said today, he hopes the press will follow that question. So that part's all on us now. Congressman Adam Schiff is here tonight, former Secretary General of NATO, is here tonight. Stay with us.